We were saying how very important it is to bring about in the human mind the radical revolution. The crisis is a crisis in consciousness, a crisis that cannot anymore accept the old norms, the old patterns, the ancient traditions. And considering what the world is now, with all the misery, conflict, destructive brutality, aggression, and so on, man is still as he was. He's still brutal, violent, aggressive, acquisitive, competitive, and he has built a society along these lines.
It was the Soviet Union's Vietnam syndrome, so to speak. It was impossible for a great superpower to run away from this wild country.
The Soviet war in Afghanistan was also known as the Soviet-Afghan War. It was a 9-year conflict involving the forces of the Soviet Union, who supported PDPA, and the Afghan government forces, who were in combatants with the anti-communist Mujahideen guerrillas. It began on December 25, 1979, and ended with Soviet withdrawal on February 15, 1989. It took place in modern-day Afghanistan. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan to preserve a communist government. In 1979, a coup which brought Hafizullah Amin to power provoked an invasion by Soviet forces and the installation of Babrak Karmal as the president.
The communists were trying to change the law of God. They wanted to destroy Islamic traditions, to rid Afghanistan of poverty and make everyone equal. This is against the law of Islam. God has decided who is rich and who is poor. It can't be changed by communists. It's beyond imagination.
The invasion, which sparked Afghan resistance, initially involved an estimated 30,000 troops, a force that ultimately grew to 100,000 men. The Mujahideen were supported by aid from the United States, China, and Saudi Arabia, which was channeled through Pakistan from Iran. In 1980, the USSR escalated the war with 2,000 tanks and squadrons of aircraft. Although the USSR had superior weapons and complete air control, the rebels successfully eluded them. The conflict largely settled into a stalemate, with Soviet and government forces controlling the urban areas, and the Afghan guerrillas operating fairly freely in mountainous rural regions. As the war progressed, the rebels improved the organization and tactics and began using imported weapons, including U.S. anti-aircraft missiles, specifically used to take out the Russian helicopters. The Soviet armies seized control of Kabul on December 27, killing Amin and installing Babrak Karmal as president. Moscow claimed its army had been officially invited into Afghanistan. Through advisors, the USSR ran Karmal's government until Moscow decided he was a failure and replaced him in May of 1986 with Mohammad Najibullah. In February 1988, President Mikhail Gorbachev announced the withdrawal of USSR troops, which was completed 1 year after. Soviet citizens had become increasingly discontented with the war, which dragged on without success but with continuing casualties. Mikhail Gorbachev decided that the economically struggling USSR needed to improve relations with the West to reduce its military spending burden. He recognized the Afghanistan war as an obstacle to better Western relations. Therefore, Moscow coerced Afghanistan into signing agreements under UN observation in Geneva on April 14, 1988, which stated that the Soviet army would withdraw from Afghanistan. This withdrawal was completed on February 15, 1989, marking the end of the war. The result of the war was over 1 million Afghan casualties, along with 5 million Afghans fleeing to Pakistan and Iran, one-third of the pre-war population of the country. Another 2 million Afghans were displaced within the country. In the 1980s, 1 out of every 2 refugees in the world was an Afghan. There was 1.2 million Afghan disabled, either mujahideen, government soldiers, and non-combatants, 3 million maimed or wounded, which were primarily civilians. Russian casualties included 14,453 killed, 118 aircraft, 333 helicopters, 172 tanks, 1,314 armored personnel carriers, 433 artillery guns and mortars, 1,138 radio sets and command vehicles, 510 engineering vehicles, 11,369 trucks and petrol tankers. Although it resulted in a stalemate, it is seen as a major military loss for Russia. U.S. President Jimmy Carter claimed that the Soviet incursion was the most serious threat to peace since the Second World War. Carter later placed a trade embargo against the Soviet Union on shipments of commodities such as grain. The increased tensions, as well as the anxiety in the West about tens of thousands of Soviet troops being in such proximity to oil-rich regions in the Persian Gulf, effectively brought about the end of the detente. The USSR and the United States had agreed in 1988 to terminate their support of their respective clients in the ongoing civil war on or before December 31, 1991. As it happened, the USSR was formally disbanded a few days before that. Deprived of aid, Najibullah's regime lost support and soon collapsed. The Mujahideen, who had fought the Soviet Union, took control of Kabul on April 28, 1992. This war was very similar to that of the Vietnam War. Both America and Russia sent advisors to their countries. Both experienced a war in which the native population was largely against the foreign forces. World opinion changed rapidly against both invaders, and like Vietnam, the superpower was seen to lose, even with superior technology. Before this war, the USA and the USSR were in a time of relaxed tensions, but this conflict brought about disagreement and fear in the people. Although Russia withdrew its forces from Afghanistan, it sprung the civil war which still rages on today. It is now Afghans fighting each other with American and Russian weapons.